The office had fallen silent long ago. Only the hum of computers and the faint whisper of rain against the windows kept Claire Bennett company. She sat at her cubicle, the last light on an empty floor, half asleep and overcaffeinated, finishing a press release no one would ever read. Her phone buzzed beside the keyboard, a text from her roommate. "Still working for the vampire?" Claire smiled. "He's not a vampire," she typed back. "He's just intense." Then her thumbs moved faster than her brain. That voice could make anyone say yes, even to the wrong thing. Send. A small, traitorous vibration. Then realization. Her breath stopped. The name at the top of the screen wasn't her roommate's. Sent to Sojin Ri. The words blurred. Her reflection on the black glass of the monitor looked pale and doomed. No, 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 she fumbled for the phone, but it was too late. The message glowed with quiet certainty, 2 blue checks confirming her professional suicide. She typed an apology, deleted it, typed another, deleted again. There was no way to explain that line, clever in private, damning in context. She'd joked about her boss's voice, about saying yes, about the wrong thing. Every version of an excuse sounded like a confession. Her heart thudded in her throat. What if he reported her to HR? What if she became a whispered story at the coffee machines, the intern who texted the CEO like he was a late-night mistake? Minutes passed. No reply. The phone stayed silent, mockingly polite. Maybe he hadn't seen it. Maybe someone else handled his messages. Maybe, by some divine corporate miracle, he'd never know her name. Upstairs, on the penthouse level, Sojin Ri paused mid-meeting. His assistant was speaking, something about projections and markets. He didn't hear it. The phone on his desk had lit once, quietly. He reached for it. One message. Unknown number. He opened it. Read it. And for the first time in years, his perfectly composed expression shifted not anger, not surprise, but a flicker of curiosity. That voice could make anyone say yes, even to the wrong thing. He reread it slowly, the rhythm of the words strange on his tongue, the audacity of it, the vulnerability, the honesty no one had dared to show him in decades. He set the phone down, eyes half shadowed by the city's light. His assistant kept talking, unaware that her boss was no longer listening to anything but the echo of a single line. Downstairs, Claire finally forced herself to move. She packed her bag, whispering a prayer to every god she'd ever ignored. She avoided the mirror by the elevators. She didn't want to see the look on her own face, half horror, half fascination. Outside, rain streaked across the streets like glass veins. She walked home fast, muttering to herself, "He won't care. He probably gets worse messages all the time." By the time she reached her apartment, the panic had dulled into humiliation. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her phone on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. The silence was unbearable. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Then a knock, soft, deliberate, twice. She froze. Another knock, calm and measured. Her pulse stuttered. She crossed the room and opened the door. Sojin Ri stood there, rain glistening on his dark coat, eyes fixed on her with unnerving stillness. "Miss Bennett," he said, voice low, unmistakable. "We should talk about the message you sent me." For a heartbeat, Claire couldn't move. Her mind blanked under the impossible sight of him standing there. Sojin Ri, the man whose name was spoken in elevators like a spell. He was taller than she expected, the line of his coat sharp against the dim hallway light. Raindrops clung to his hair, glittering like fragments of night. "May I come in?" It wasn't a question. She stepped aside automatically. The air shifted as he entered, colder, quieter. He didn't look around, didn't need to. His presence filled the space as if it had always been his. Her apartment suddenly felt too small, too human. A single lamp glowed near the couch. The faint smell of coffee and rain lingered. Claire crossed her arms, more for defense than warmth. "Mr. Ri, I didn't mean to." "Send it?" he finished for her. His voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used in interviews, the one that could end or save careers. I assumed not, but it was an interesting message. He turned slightly toward her. The movement was deliberate, slow the way a predator gives prey a chance to understand what's happening. That voice could make anyone say yes, even to the wrong thing, he quoted. Her face burned. It was a joke. For a friend. And yet, he said, you sent it to me. Silence settled, heavy and electric. Rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. She wanted to disappear, but something in his expression, not anger, but curiosity, kept her rooted. Are you angry? She asked finally. No. His gaze flicked briefly toward the ceiling, as though searching for the right word. Intrigued. The word landed between them like a spark. He stepped closer. Claire's instinct screamed to back away, but she didn't. There was something magnetic about the quiet confidence in him, something ancient beneath the immaculate control. Tell me, he said, why does a woman who fears me enough to stay at the office until midnight speak of me that way when she believes I can't hear? Her throat tightened. Because that's when I stop pretending, she admitted. Everyone at work acts like you're some kind of machine. I guess I wanted to remind myself, you're still human. He tilted his head slightly. And if I'm not? The question was casual, but his eyes caught the light strangely, reflecting too much of it, like liquid metal. She blinked, unsure if it was the lamp or her imagination. Then, she said quietly, I'd still rather talk to whatever you are than to half the men pretending to be alive out there. For the first time, he smiled, faint, precise, devastating. Careful, Miss Bennett. You have a dangerous way with honesty. He took a step back, the air between them vibrating with something neither of them dared to name. I didn't come to reprimand you, he said finally. But next time you decide to describe me, try not to make it sound like a temptation. Her pulse stuttered. That wasn't my intention. No, he murmured. But it was the effect. He turned toward the door, hand resting on the knob, then paused. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day. And then he was gone, leaving her apartment smelling faintly of rain and something darker, something like iron and memory. Claire stood in the silence, heart hammering. She wanted to believe the conversation was over. But the way he had looked at her, calm, searching, hungry for something even he didn't understand, told her this was only the beginning. The next morning, the building felt different. It wasn't the light or the endless buzz of elevators, it was the air itself, heavier, charged. Claire Bennett had slept little. Her dreams were tangled with fragments of last night, the knock, the voice, his impossible calm. She kept replaying it, half mortified, half drawn to the memory of how near he'd stood. At her desk, people whispered about a rumor. The CEO had shown up unexpectedly in one of the residential towers downtown. No one knew why, and no one dared to ask him. When the elevator doors opened that morning, Sojin Ri stepped out. Conversations died instantly. His tailored suit was charcoal, his shirt dark. The contrast made his skin almost luminous. Claire forced herself to keep typing, pretending she didn't feel the weight of his presence sweep the room. He stopped beside her desk. Miss Bennett. Her hands froze on the keyboard. Yes, Mr. Ri? You left your ID card in the lobby last night. He placed it gently on her desk. She reached for it, careful not to touch his fingers. The faintest brush of air between them was enough to jolt her pulse. Thank you, she murmured. He studied her for a moment, too long for politeness, too brief for clarity. Then, softly, do all your accidents end this interestingly? She blinked. I try to avoid repeating them. Good, he said, and left, his stride smooth and quiet, like a thought fading before it could be caught. The entire office exhaled when the elevator doors closed behind him. Claire tried to breathe too, but her lungs refused to cooperate. The rest of the morning blurred. She spilled coffee on a report, answered the wrong email chain, and caught her reflection, twice pale, distracted, alive, in a way she hadn't felt before. By noon, her manager asked her to deliver a file to the top floor directly to Mr. Ree's office. The task should have been routine, but the elevator ride felt like an ascent into myth. The doors opened onto silence. His office was vast and dim, floor-to-ceiling windows painting the room in silver light. "Come in," his voice said from somewhere beyond her view. She stepped forward. He was standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, posture immaculate. The city burned faintly behind him. "You've been avoiding looking at me," he said without turning. She hesitated. "You make that difficult." He glanced over his shoulder, and for a moment his eyes seemed darker, too dark, too deep. "I could say the same." Claire swallowed. "I didn't mean to offend you." "You didn't." He faced her fully now. "You disturbed me. There's a difference." Her breath caught. "I'm not sure what that means." "Neither am I," he said, almost to himself. "But I intend to find out." He reached for the file she held, fingers brushing hers. The contact was light, yet it burned, cold and electric. She looked down and saw that his skin was impossibly pale, veins faintly visible like ink drawn beneath marble. He pulled back quickly, closing the file. "That will be all, Miss Bennet." She turned to leave, her heart pounding. But before she reached the door, his voice came again, low and unreadable. "And Claire, next time you decide to describe me, be careful what you make me remember." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't have to. She could feel it, the same hunger she'd seen flicker behind his calm. It wasn't just hers anymore. That night, Sojin Ree dreamed something he hadn't done in more than a century. In the dream, a woman stood in the middle of his boardroom, barefoot on polished marble, her pulse echoing louder than the city outside. When she lifted her head, her face was Claire's, and when she spoke, her voice bled light. He woke just before she touched him, the sound of her heartbeat still in his ears. He sat up, eyes unfocused, the taste of blood sharp in his throat. Hunger, not the kind he'd mastered for decades, something different, older, irrational. He went to the mirror and stared at the stranger reflected there. His eyes had darkened to the color of wine, his fangs half bared in the faintest tremor of loss. By morning, the world had returned to order, but he hadn't. Every decision felt slightly off balance, every word dragged by gravity. His assistant noticed the shift, but didn't dare ask. The only one who seemed to move freely around him was Claire Bennet, unaware, or pretending not to be. She came to deliver reports, her voice steady despite the tension curling in the air. The moment she entered, his control strained. Her scent carried a trace of rain and vanilla, faint but merciless. He told himself it was curiosity, that he was studying what disturbed him, not craving it. "You look pale," she said one afternoon, genuine concern softening her tone. "I don't sleep much," he replied. "You should. Even CEOs need rest." He almost smiled. "Even vampires," he thought. "You speak as if you know what I am." "You're human," she said simply, and that word landed like a wound. He turned away, hiding his reaction. She had no idea how wrong she was or how much he wanted her to be right. That evening, she left a small paper cup of coffee on his desk, half joking, half kind. "In case you ever decide to join the living," she'd said. He waited until she was gone, then lifted it, studying the warmth still clinging to the rim. He could smell her fingertips on the lid. He shouldn't have cared, but he did. When he set the cup down, a drop of coffee slid across the glass, dark as blood. His vision sharpened the pulse of a secretary down the hall, the heartbeat of the guard by the door. The hunger he'd buried clawed upward. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Not her." The next time she came into his office, he stood farther away, his voice distant, precise. "Miss Bennet, limit your after-hours work. I prefer my staff well-rested." "Are you worried about me?" she teased gently. He looked at her then, really looked at the light on her hair, the pulse at her throat, the tiny freckle near her wrist. His jaw tightened. "No, I'm worried about myself." She frowned, unsure if he was joking, but something in his tone silenced her. He turned his back to the window, hands clasped as if restraining an invisible force. That night, the city burned in glass and neon, and he stood watching it from his penthouse. The hunger had changed. It wasn't only for blood anymore. It was for her voice, her laughter, the warmth he could never keep. When dawn touched the skyline, Sojin-ri finally understood what terrified him most. It wasn't the thirst. It was the possibility that she could make him remember what it felt like to be alive. The storm came without warning, a hard, relentless rain that turned the glass tower into a cage of reflections. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving only the hum of servers and the faint rhythm of thunder. Claire Bennett stayed behind to finish one last report. She told herself it was for work. The truth was simpler. She wanted to understand what he was hiding. She found him in his office, standing near the window as lightning traced silver veins across the sky. His suit jacket hung over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled, the faintest shadow beneath his eyes. He looked tired, not human tired, but something deeper, the kind that lives inside centuries. "You shouldn't be here this late," he said, not turning. "Neither should you," she replied softly. He glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "I have habits that don't adjust to daylight." "You mean insomnia?" He almost smiled. "Something like that." She stepped closer. "You've been avoiding me." He said nothing. The rain filled the silence, drumming against the windows like 1,000 tiny clocks. "If I did something wrong," she continued, "tell me. I can handle it." "You did nothing wrong." "Then why won't you look at me?" That struck him. Slowly, he turned. His gaze caught hers, and for the first time, she saw what others missed, the unnatural stillness in his movements, the faint glow buried in his eyes, the tension of a man fighting himself. "Because I don't trust what I'll do if I do," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, then crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. The air between them thickened, charged with something neither of them could name. "You shouldn't have spoken about my voice that way," he said, "not because it offended me, but because it reminded me." "Of what?" "Of what I used to be before I learned how to live without wanting." Her pulse quickened. "You make it sound like wanting is a crime." "For me, it is." Lightning flashed, illuminating the faint trace of veins beneath his skin, darker, sharper than they should be. His composure faltered. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Good. You should be." He took a step back, as if restraining something. "I'm not what you think, Claire. I can't be." She swallowed. "Then tell me what you are." He looked at her, a long, broken stare, and for once, the mask fell. "Something that shouldn't exist. Something that feeds on the very warmth I crave." Her mind fought to make sense of it, but her body already knew the cold around him, the stillness, the hunger behind his gaze. "You're—" He nodded once, barely. "Yes." Silence stretched, fragile and trembling. He expected fear, disgust, anything to end the moment. But Claire didn't run. She took a slow breath, steadying herself, and said, "Then why are you starving?" He blinked, startled. "If that's what you are, why do you look like a man dying to be human?" For the first time, he broke eye contact. He turned toward the window, voice barely a whisper. "Because I met you." Lightning rolled again, and between the flashes, their reflections merged on the glass predator and human, shadow and heartbeat. Neither spoke again. The truth hung between them, heavy and irreversible. For the next 3 days, Sojin-ri didn't appear at the office. No meetings, no messages, not even his shadow in the penthouse corridor. It was as if the city had swallowed him whole. The staff whispered, theories, travel, illness, scandal, but none of them dared speak his name too loudly, as if the sound might summon him. Claire tried to work, though her mind kept circling back to that night, his words, his eyes, the strange mix of fear and longing in his voice. The rational part of her refused to believe what he'd said. The rest of her already did. Every cold breath in that office, every flicker of light that dimmed when he passed, it all made sense now. When he finally returned, the building felt it first. The elevator hummed differently. The temperature dropped. And then he walked in, sharper, paler, distant. His silence wasn't indifference this time. It was armor. He passed her desk without a glance, his presence slicing the air. Still, she felt it, the pull, that invisible gravity that had followed her since the night of his confession. By evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. She found him alone in his office, lights off, except for the faint glow of the skyline. His jacket hung open. The veins on his hands were darker, his expression strained. "You shouldn't be here," he said without looking up. "You keep saying that," she answered quietly. "But I'm here anyway." He looked up, then eyes a shade too dark, too hungry. "It's dangerous. For you or for me?" He stood, the motion fluid, almost soundless. For both. The storm outside began again, wind pressing against the glass. He moved closer, his control unraveling thread by thread. She could feel the tension in him, the way he fought against instinct, the way his body leaned toward her even as he tried to retreat. "You told me you don't feed," she said. "I don't," he replied, voice rough. "Not anymore." "Then why do you look like it's killing you?" He smiled faintly, tragic, hollow. "Because it is." She reached out before thinking, fingertips grazing his sleeve. The reaction was immediate. His breath hitched, his pupils dilated, and every muscle in his body went still. "Claire," he whispered, her name breaking like a vow. The lights flickered. The air seemed to thrum, as if the building itself could sense his restraint fracturing. She should have stepped back, but she didn't. Her touch remained gentle, human, defiant. "What do you want from me?" she asked softly. He closed his eyes, voice barely audible. To not want at all. The confession landed between them like thunder. He stepped back, forcing distance, his control trembling. "Go home," he said, though his voice had lost its command. "Before I remember what I am." "I already know what you are," she said, "and you're still here." That broke something. He turned away sharply, hands gripping the edge of his desk until the wood cracked beneath his fingers. The scent of ozone filled the air, mingling with rain. "Please," he said, almost begging, "don't make me choose." Her heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "Then don't." He turned, eyes burning like embers trying to die out. For a heartbeat, she thought he'd reach for her. Instead, he vanished, not with sound, but with the collapse of presence, leaving only the scent of storm and the faint warmth of where he'd stood. Claire exhaled, trembling. She looked out at the skyline, thousands of lights flickering like fragile stars, and realized the truth that terrified her most. She wasn't afraid of the monster. She was afraid of what he made her want. Rumors never slept inside Vale International. They spread like light through glass. By the end of the week, whispers crawled through every floor. The CEO had changed. His temper was shorter, his eyes darker. And he'd started protecting the intern who didn't know her place. Claire Bennett felt the stares before she heard the words. Conversations paused when she passed. The security team shadowed her movements with silent curiosity. She tried to focus on her work, but her reflection in the monitor betrayed her, restless, distracted, alive. Late one evening, she found a note slipped under her keyboard. "You don't know what he is. Stay away." No signature, just clean, deliberate handwriting. Her hands trembled as she folded it. She already knew what he was. What she didn't know was how far that truth reached. That night, Sojin Ri stood on the roof of his tower, wind clawing at his coat. His phone buzzed with alerts, internal leaks, unauthorized emails. Someone inside the company had found traces of his past. Forged documents, identities that spanned decades, photographs that never aged. It was unraveling. He felt it before he saw it, another presence watching from the dark. A man stepped from the shadows, suit immaculate, eyes reflecting the city lights like knives. Elias Park, his oldest rival, another creature who had traded blood for influence. "You've gotten sloppy, Sojin," Elias said. "Attachment dulls the teeth. You shouldn't have come." "I had to. She's become a liability. Humans don't keep secrets long." "She will," Sojin said, voice steady. "You believe that? Because you want to. You think she loves you. But what happens when she learns what you've done to stay alive?" Sojin's hands tightened at his sides. "Stay away from her." Elias smiled thinly. "I can't. The council won't allow it. They've seen the footage. Your reflection appearing in the glass beside her. Your eyes. They know." Lightning flashed. Rain cut through the night like silver blades. "If they come for her," Sojin said, "I'll burn the council to ash." "And prove to the world what you are?" Elias tilted his head. "You can't save her without ending yourself." When he vanished into the wind, the rooftop felt smaller, the city quieter. Sojin stayed there until dawn, watching the horizon bleed from black to gray. Down below, Claire woke to find her apartment door ajar, a single white envelope taped to it. Inside, one photograph, herself at work, smiling faintly at her desk. The back of the photo was blank, except for 4 words written in elegant ink. "He cannot protect you." Her heart pounded. She looked toward the window and caught her own reflection, but for a fleeting second, she swore she saw someone else standing behind her. And miles away, in his darkened office, Sojin felt it, a pulse that wasn't his own, a warning threaded through the night. They had found her. The world he'd kept buried was about to surface, and the one person who made him remember life was now marked for death. The night stretched thin around Sojin Ri, the city glimmering beneath his penthouse like 1,000 fragile hearts beating out of sync. Every instinct he'd trained for centuries screamed the same command: disappear. That was how his kind survived. Silence, shadows, detachment. But this time, he couldn't vanish. Not while Claire Bennett slept beneath the weight of a threat meant for him. He poured a glass of blood wine, the kind his people used to dull hunger, and left it untouched. His reflection in the window was faint, fractured by the storm. He whispered her name once, as if it might steady the air. It didn't. When the phone vibrated, he knew who it was before answering. Elias Park's voice slithered through the line, smooth as glass. "You've forced their hand, Sojin. They're coming tonight. Don't make it worse than it needs to be." "She's done nothing. She saw you. That's enough. I'll erase the memories." "You can't erase what she makes you feel." The call ended with static. Sojin stood motionless, then turned toward the door. Down in her apartment, Claire stared at the photo again. She hadn't called the police. How could she explain it? The note, the presence, the impossible fear. The air shifted suddenly, temperature dropping, and she knew he was there before he spoke. "Pack your things," he said from the doorway. She spun around. "You can't just appear like that. They know where you are." "Who?" "The ones who made me." Her voice trembled. "Why me?" "Because I broke their law." He moved closer, fast but gentle, his hands hovering near her shoulders as if afraid to touch. "I promised myself I'd never risk another life for mine. But I can't lose you." She stepped back, shaking her head. "You can't protect me from things like that, Sojin. Watch me." The lights flickered. The storm outside thickened, a pulse of thunder echoing his restraint. She saw the fangs then, the faint glint of something ancient breaking through the calm. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "They'll try." She reached for him, desperate. "Don't." He caught her wrist, holding it against his chest. No heartbeat, only silence. "If they come, they'll come through me first," he said. "Promise me you won't open the door for anyone. You can't do this alone." "I've done everything alone," he said, voice soft but final. "Until you." For a long moment, they stood in the half-light, the predator and the woman who'd made him remember humanity. Then, as lightning tore through the skyline, he was gone, dissolved into the storm. the echo of his voice lingering in the air. Claire collapsed onto the couch, shaking. Outside, the city roared like a living thing. Somewhere above, on a rooftop no human could reach, Sojin faced the gathering dark figures, stepping from shadow, eyes burning red with judgment. He straightened his cuffs, expression calm. "You want the monster?" he said. "You made him." And as the first blow came, he thought only of her, the one mistake that had turned into the only thing worth dying for. Rain fell like shattered glass across the skyline. Lightning exposed flashes of movement on the rooftop, silhouettes circling, eyes glinting crimson. Sojin-ri stood at the center, coat whipping in the wind, the storm reflecting in his gaze. The old hunger coiled beneath his skin, the one he had starved for years. Elias Park stepped forward first, smiling with centuries of cruelty. "You never learned, Sojin. Mortals are toys, not salvation." "You mistake restraint for weakness," Sojin said quietly. "She isn't a toy. She's proof that we can still choose." "Choose?" Elias sneered. "You've forgotten what we are." "No," Sojin replied, eyes hardening. "I remember too well." Then the first strike came, a blur of speed and light. Sojin moved faster, catching the blow, twisting, sending his attacker crashing into steel. Another came from behind. The rooftop erupted into chaos. The hiss of claws, the hiss of thunder. Sparks flew as metal tore under inhuman strength. For centuries, he'd hidden this, the predator beneath the suit. Tonight, he let it surface. The power was terrifying, pure, and painful. Every strike burned his restraint away. Every drop of blood reminded him of what he'd vowed never to become. But when he saw the shadows moving toward the city below, he understood their intent. They weren't just after him. They wanted her. Downstairs, in her apartment, Claire Bennett couldn't stay still. The clock glowed 1:07 a.m. Her body trembled, but not from fear, from knowing he was out there alone. The wind howled, rattling the window. Against every promise, she ran. She didn't take the elevator. She climbed. Stairwell after stairwell, lungs burning, soaked in rain before she even reached the roof. She pushed the heavy door open, and the scene before her froze her breath. Sojin, surrounded. 4 of them left, their faces pale, beautiful, monstrous. Elias held him by the throat, blood staining the collar of his shirt. "You can't protect her," Elias hissed. "You'll kill her yourself." Claire's voice cracked through the storm. "Stop!" Every head turned. Sojin's eyes widened, fury and fear colliding. "Claire, no!" But she was already moving toward him, the wind tearing at her coat. Elias smiled. There she is, the weakness. He shoved Sojin aside and blurred forward, too fast for her to see. But before his fangs touched her skin, Sojin was there intercepting, crashing into Elias with a roar that split the night. They hit the ground hard, concrete splintering beneath them. The storm howled louder. Claire knelt beside Sojin, hands trembling. His blood darker than any human's dripped onto the roof. "You shouldn't have come," he rasped. "You shouldn't have fought alone," she shot back. Elias staggered to his feet, eyes blazing. "Then die together." He lunged. Sojin turned, too slow this time. But Claire moved first, grabbing a broken steel rod from the debris, thrusting it forward with every ounce of terror and love in her body. The sound was sickening, final. Elias froze, eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered, before collapsing into the rain. Silence. Only thunder filled the space, where eternity had just bled out. Sojin stared at her, stunned, shaken, alive. "You shouldn't have seen that," he murmured. "I saw enough," she whispered. "You bled to protect me. Now you'll live for me." He smiled faintly, collapsing against her shoulder. "I don't think I can." She held him tighter, rain washing over them, whispering through clenched teeth, "Then I'll remember you for both of us." The night went still. The city lights flickered, and in the chaos of storm and blood, Sojin Ri closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in peace. Morning crept in soft and silver, washing the city clean. The rooftop was empty now, no blood, no shadows, just the quiet hum of rain draining into silence. Weeks later, Claire Bennett sat at her desk again. Vale International had shut down for restructuring, the paper said. No one spoke of Sojin Ri. No one dared. But sometimes, when the lights flickered, she still felt him, the calm before his voice, the stillness that filled a room like gravity. She opened the drawer where she'd hidden the ring he'd left behind, black metal, faintly warm to the touch. Inside, a single note in his handwriting. Don't forget the living part of me. Outside her window, dawn broke through the skyline. A streak of sunlight caught on the glass tower across the street, and for the briefest second, a reflection moved where no one stood. She smiled, whispering, I didn't. The city exhaled. Somewhere within its pulse, something eternal stirred, not hunger, not shadow, but memory. And for the first time in 400 years, the immortal who had tried not to feel was part of the world again through her.